March 15th, 44 BC, 23 wounds. And the man holding one of the blades was someone Caesar trusted like a son. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how a friendship that close turned into the most famous betrayal in history, and why the men who did it ended up destroying the very republic they thought they were saving. To understand what happened on the Ides of March, you have to understand what Rome had already survived to get there. By the time Julius Caesar was born, the Roman Republic had stood for nearly 400 years without a king. That word, rex, wasn't just unpopular, it was practically forbidden, baked into the Roman identity itself, ever since their ancestors had overthrown the last king centuries earlier. Caesar didn't start as a threat to that system. He started as one of many ambitious Roman politicians, climbing the traditional ladder of offices: quaestor, aedile, praetor, building alliances, building debt, building a reputation as a skilled and popular leader. Then came Gaul. Over roughly 8 years, Caesar led a military campaign that expanded Roman territory dramatically, defeating tribal confederations across what's now France and parts of surrounding regions. He became, without question, one of the most successful generals Rome had ever produced, and one of the wealthiest, and one of the most popular with the common people. That popularity worried Rome's traditional power structure. The Senate, and particularly a faction led by Pompey, once Caesar's ally, now his rival, moved to strip Caesar of his command and force him back to Rome as a private citizen, stripped of the legal protection his position gave him. Caesar's response changed Roman history. In 49 BC, he led his army across the Rubicon River, the boundary a general was legally forbidden to cross with troops still under arms. It wasn't just a military act, it was a direct declaration that he would not submit. Civil war followed. And when it ended, Caesar hadn't just won. He'd outlasted every serious rival for power in the Roman world. The Senate, whether from genuine respect or simple political necessity, began granting him extraordinary honors, triumphs, extended terms, and finally, the title that made the danger explicit even if the word king was never used: dictator for life. But Caesar's rise wasn't what finally pushed his enemies to act. That came down to one word. To some, this was Rome finally getting the stability it desperately needed after decades of civil conflict. To others, it was something they'd been taught, from childhood, to fear more than almost anything else: one man holding permanent, unchecked power over the Republic. Among that second group was Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus's family history mattered here in a way that's easy to overlook today. Centuries earlier, an ancestor of his, Lucius Junius Brutus, had led the overthrow of Rome's last king and helped found the Republic itself. For a man carrying that name, opposing a would-be monarch wasn't abstract politics. It was inheritance. And here's what makes this story different from an ordinary political assassination. Brutus wasn't just a senator opposing a policy. Ancient sources describe an unusually close relationship between Brutus and Caesar. Some accounts suggest Caesar treated him with real personal warmth, even favor, well beyond ordinary political alliance. Some ancient historians even record rumors, never confirmed, of an even deeper personal connection between Caesar and Brutus's mother, Servilia. Whatever the exact nature of that bond, the ancient sources agree on this: Caesar trusted Brutus. Genuinely. That trust is exactly what made Brutus valuable to the conspiracy that was forming against Caesar. The plot was led in large part by Gaius Cassius Longinus, a skilled and battle-tested senator with his own grievances against Caesar's rule. But Cassius understood something important. A conspiracy led purely by Caesar's rivals would look like exactly what it was: a power grab. A conspiracy that included Brutus, a man widely respected for his integrity and his family's Republican legacy, would look like something else entirely. It would look like principle. What Cassius did next is the reason this assassination succeeded where others had failed. So Cassius worked to bring Brutus in, and eventually, after considerable internal conflict, ancient sources describe Brutus wrestling seriously with the decision. He agreed. The conspiracy grew to include, by most historical estimates, more than 60 senators. And the plan they settled on was deliberate in a specific, chilling way. No single conspirator would strike alone. Every one of them would take part in the killing, so that the responsibility and the risk was shared completely. No one man could be singled out as the assassin. All of them would be. They chose their moment. March 15th, the Ides of March, a Senate meeting where Caesar was expected to attend without his usual guard. Warnings reached him anyway. A soothsayer had reportedly told him weeks earlier to beware the Ides of March. On the morning itself, a friend is said to have pressed a written warning into his hand as he walked toward the Senate. Caesar reportedly never read it before the meeting began. What happened next took less than a minute and changed the next 1,000 years of Western history. Inside the chamber, the conspirators surrounded him under the pretext of presenting a petition on behalf of a senator's exiled brother. Then Tullius Cimber grabbed at Caesar's toga, the signal. Casca struck first. What followed was chaotic, not clean. 23 wounds, by the account that survives, and by most modern historical analysis, that number itself tells a story. Many of the wounds were shallow, uncertain, the marks of men who weren't trained killers, stabbing in panic and adrenaline as much as intention. And among them, driving in his own blade, was Brutus. The conspirators believed, genuinely, that they had just saved the Republic. Some accounts describe them walking out into the streets afterward expecting to be met as liberators. That is not what happened. Rome didn't erupt in relief. It erupted in confusion, then fear, then fury. Mark Antony, Caesar's close ally and co-consul, seized the moment. At Caesar's funeral, Antony delivered a public address that turned the crowd violently against the conspirators, reading Caesar's will aloud, revealing he'd left money directly to the Roman people, and displaying his blood-stained toga to the assembled crowd. The mood shifted almost overnight. Brutus and Cassius, expecting gratitude, found themselves fleeing Rome instead, hunted as murderers rather than celebrated as liberators. What followed wasn't a restoration of the old republic. It was over a decade more of civil war. First between the conspirators and Caesar's allies, then eventually between those allies themselves. Brutus and Cassius were defeated at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. Both took their own lives rather than face capture. And at the very end of that long chain of violence, Rome didn't get its republic back at all. It got an emperor. Caesar's adopted heir, a young man named Octavian, outmaneuvered every rival, including Antony himself, and in 27 BC took the name Augustus, becoming Rome's first emperor, holding power more total and more permanent than Caesar had ever actually claimed for himself. The men who killed a tyrant to save the Republic ended up handing Rome to an emperor anyway. That's the first betrayal in this series, a warning about how trust, once weaponized, can destroy the very thing it was meant to protect. Follow for more of history's greatest betrayals.